Welcome back, my gardening friends, to another Focal Point Friday episode. Let's spend just a few minutes together reviewing a snippet of information from a previous episode, highlighting a new topic, or quickly focusing on a current event in the food and agriculture world. Let's get down and dirty. Now, what's important here is timing your fall planting. Just like when we're planting in the spring, there are 3 different things that you have to take into consideration when you're figuring out when you should be starting your seeds and when you should be transplanting, and then when you should be actually putting your seeds directly into the ground. You want to think about the germination time, the days to maturity, and then your harvest window. So germination time, the days to germination sometimes are listed on the seed packets and sometimes they're not. A lot of the time there's something that you kind of have to look up. But the days to germination are going to differ a little bit depending on how you're starting them when you're starting them for the fall garden versus the spring. In most instances for the spring, we're starting them indoors. So it's a kind of a carefully controlled environment a little bit, but it's generally not quite as warm as if, say, you were to start them now and start them outside. So right now, my fall brassicas, I started those seeds outside in the greenhouse. Well, it routinely gets up to be 100 some odd degrees in that greenhouse in the middle of the summertime, in the middle of the day. So those suckers popped up like within a couple of days. I think it was 2 days before I started seeing most of those plants start popping up. And then by the end of the 3rd day, almost all of them had germinated. That's a stark contrast for the, I want to say it was 8 days at least, for those to germinate in the spring when they were downstairs in my little seed germination area. So take that into consideration when you're timing when you're going to start your seeds, if you're starting them indoors or if you're starting them outside. The next thing that you want to look at is days to maturity. So how long is it going to be from the time that those plants come up to the time that you're going to get a chance to harvest them? Remember, when you're looking on these seed packets, a lot of the time those days to maturity are from transplant. So it makes a difference. If you say something says, well, it's 50 days to maturity, but it takes 7 to 10 days for it to germinate, and then you don't transplant it out for another 2 to 3 weeks, you have to take that into consideration to base your timing on that. And then you also want to take into consideration the harvest window. So something like green beans, you're generally going to be harvesting over a 2 to 3 week period versus carrots where, well, you're either going to dig them all at once because they're all mature, or you're going to dig the smaller ones first and then leave the rest of them in the ground for a little while. How long of a window do you have? Once you have all of these things sort of figured out, that's when you add all that up and you go and you look at your first frost date. And then you start counting backwards from there. Once you figure out that date, that's going to tell you the date that you should be starting your seeds for your own transplants. And then obviously, if you're going to be buying transplants elsewhere, you can take off that germination time and the time that you're growing them before you put them in the ground and just base it on the days to maturity and the harvest window. You would also take into consideration the days to maturity and the harvest window if you're planting directly from seed. So things like green beans or peas or beets and carrots, things that you're planting directly into the soil. You're just wanting to figure out the germination time plus the days to maturity, plus the harvest window. You don't have to worry about that couple of week period where you're growing those seedlings on before transplant. So really the timing is going to depend on what it is that you're growing, how you're starting it, if you are starting it, or whether or not you're going to be buying them from seedlings, and then whether or not you're planting them directly into the soil or starting them ahead of time. Now, if you don't have a first frost, you still need to be timing these things because you're going to hit your Persephone period, that period where your daylight hours drop below 10 hours a day. Once you hit that part of the year, your plants pretty much stop growing. So even if you're in a milder climate and you don't actually get a frost, you still have a deadline for when you want to get these things into the ground. Thanks for joining me on this Focal Point Friday. I'll be back again on Tuesday for another regular episode of the Just Grow Something podcast. So until next time, my gardening friends, keep on cultivating that dream garden, and we'll talk again soon.